How's it going? This is Keanu Yamamoto with the Coachers Podcast, sitting here with Coach Jacob Yoro, Safeties Coach for Missouri football. Coach, thanks for jumping on. Please tell us about your family, journey, background, all that good stuff.
Thanks for having me, Keanu. Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Hawaii, went to St. Louis school, was able to play my college football career at the University of Montana, which was really awesome, and then went back home, and it was there that I kind of started coaching football. Started coaching high school ball. Started off at Mililani High School for a year under Coach Millwood, and then I was able to get back to St. Louis, my alma mater, and coach there for a number of years. And then eventually kind of wanted to be able to chase the dream of coaching college football. I didn't really know how to get involved in it, how to get started, but I was able to get connected with the coaching staff at the University of Montana Western, an NAIA school out in Dillon, Montana. And so at that point, I think Coach Tommy Lee, kind of legendary Hawaii coach, had just retired from there. His son Pohai was the offensive coordinator. And I was able to go up there and be a linebacker coach there for a season in 2009. From there, got a call from Keith Buckley, who is now the athletic director at Pacific University. He was restarting the program at Pacific, a Division III program out there in Forest Grove, which you're familiar with in the Northwest Conference. And so I spent 5 years there as a defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. And then I was able to get hired at Cal Poly, an FCS school in San Luis Obispo. Coached the safeties there for 2 years. And then Nick Rolovich hired me home, which was a tremendous blessing to be able to go back home to the University of Hawaii and do what I love to do around the people that I love to be around, right? And so being able to do that in front of my family, I did that for 7 years. Multiple positions, multiple head coaches that I worked for there. Was able to, my daughter was born there and spent the first 5 years of her life there, which was a real blessing. Being able to kind of imprint her with island culture and imprint her with our family and things of that nature. And so was there with Nick Rolovich for 3 years, Todd Brown for 2, and then spent 2 years with Timmy Chang for his first 2 years there at the University of Hawaii. And then in 2024, was hired here at the University of Missouri, and I've been here now going on my 3rd season.
That's awesome, Coach. Thanks for sharing that. What's the first love? Is it linebackers? I know you're coaching safeties right now at Missouri. What's the first love? If you could only choose one, what we're sticking with for the rest of our life?
Oh, that's tough. My background initially when I got in the game was linebacker. That's what I played. And, linebacker and safety, there's so many similarities in regards to the skill sets that are needed mentally, being able to kind of operate the defense and being able to do those things from a schematic point of view. If you were to ask my wife what she would rather me coach, she's going to say linebacker just because you catch less fire in the middle of a game. I really enjoy coaching safeties. I really do. Just the amount of, mental capacity that's needed and the amount of teaching that goes on from a schematic perspective. I think I really love doing those things and really have enjoyed doing those over the last few years.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, just being an island boy, being a Hawaii guy inside Missouri. What's that like?
Yeah, it's been really awesome. Just kind of the pace of life is a lot slower than, the city of Oahu and what's going on there and stuff. But in regards to that, just kind of the people here are very similar, just kind of laid back and kind of a lot of family atmosphere. Guys are really friendly around here. And so it's been good. And then, we have a decent pocket of Hawaii people. My dentist is from Hawaii. She's a Punahou grad. Coach Corey Batoon, our defensive coordinator. The reason why I'm at Missouri is from Hawaii, from Kaneohe, and his wife is from Waimanalo. Our head of compliance, Will Kava. He's a Hawaii guy, went to Iolani school. And there's some other people kind of throughout the community that are, from the islands. And so that's been nice.
That's good, Coach. Tell us a little bit about the why behind coaching.
Yeah. My why, on why I do it on a daily basis, obviously, it's for my family and being able to support them and give them a type of lifestyle that's comfortable and, being able to, see different places around the country and be able to travel and do those things. And, my daughter and my wife are the main, reasons why, we work the long hours and do those things. But, the reason why I fell in love with coaching, I think is 2 parts. I've worked in civilian life, right? When I got back to Hawaii and I was coaching high school ball, I was working at Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. I had done security jobs after college. I've done those things. So I didn't go straight into coaching, right? I kind of did the normal life. And the one thing that I thought was really missing from the jobs that I worked was the inability to really create deep relationships and bonds with the people I worked with, right? I think you make friends, in the workplace and you're able to go through a lot of good experiences and different things, but I don't think you create deep bonds of friendship and relationships unless you go through really hard things together. And, the normal work activity for me wasn't really presenting that. And being an athlete my entire life and being able to have those, tight relationships and friendships, that was really missing for me as I kind of grew into adulthood. And so coaching football has kind of given me the ability to be in a profession where I'm working, for a living, but I'm also being able to go through some really hard things and go through adversity with other people and be able to really develop, bonds of friendships and creating relationships with people, whether it's your coworkers or the guys you coach, that I don't think was really out there for me in the civilian world, right? And so kind of that relationship piece for me really drew me to coaching football. And then the second piece is, I'm an ultra competitive person. And again, when I kind of grew into adulthood, I no longer had that outlet to be able to kind of let my competitive juices, run. I mean, I couldn't run like I used to. I couldn't jump like I used to, couldn't do those things. And so those things were kind of lacking. And now coaching has kind of provided me the opportunity to be able to compete at the highest level and be able to constantly wake up every morning knowing that your competition is trying to get better and that you better keep up and you better find your edge. And so those two things I think really drew me to coaching and kept me in it, the relationships and the competitive nature of it.
Can you kind of reflect and, just to your time back coaching high school ball, your time at Montana Western, time at Pacific, some of those, for lack of a better term, lower levels, some of the lessons that you learned back in those days that you still carry with you today?
I mean, there were so many lessons learned right at that level. And I really, I look back, especially at my time at Pacific, I really look back and I think of that as kind of my experimental lab. It was a place where I could freely, as a coach and as a coordinator, I could kind of really think outside the box. I was able to kind of put schemes out there, do different things within a practice schedule, whatever it may be, without the repercussions of worrying about, you getting blasted on Twitter or being fired the next week or whatever the case may be, right? It was kind of a safe place for me to really be able to learn, right? And like anything, you learn by doing, that's where you get the most, out of those experiences. And Pacific really provided that safe environment for me to really grow as a coach. And, there's going to be things schematically or practice-wise or game planning that I'll never do again because I messed it up there, right? But there's also a lot of things where the ability to think freely and be able to try to execute those things, I think I've been able to carry with me and be able to kind of bring up those ideas or use those ideas later on being, or hey, we had to deal with that when we played against Linfield one year. And what I really thought worked was this. And, we really kind of sometimes go back through some of those things and see if they apply now.
So what's important to your coaching philosophy? What's important to you and you guys in your safeties room?
I heard this a long time ago. And it's something that I think a lot of people have heard. It's something that I try to remind myself quite a bit, but I don't know who said it. And they told me that, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right. And I don't think that changes at any level. And even with the changes right now in college football, with the transfer portal and NIL and things being a lot more transactional in the relationships that are occurring in the business of this world, at the end of the day, it's still people. And so therefore, it's a people business, right? And so I think that to me is something that I make sure that I remind myself daily, is making sure and understanding that these guys got to know that I care and that we got to be able to build relationships outside the game of football. And those are the things that are going to get us through all these changes that are happening in football right now. Whether it's transfer portal, whether it's NIL contract negotiations, all of those things. At the end of the day, these are still 18 to 22-year-old men that are looking to be around people that care about them and are looking to develop them. And so, that's been a core philosophy for me. And I think that helps out with some of the things that we're dealing with right now in this day and age of college football.
Yeah, kind of not thinking about the external factors, the transfer portal, NIL. If you just remove those from the equation, what would you say is one of the greatest challenges within the realms of coaching?
I mean, it's the time commitment for sure, right? I mean, when I look at it and I think about the greatest challenges, I don't think about the tough games playing on the road. I don't think about the game plans that make things hard and, trying to game plan a triple option or doing all those things, right? To me, it's a time away from family and finding a way to be an elite husband and elite father while also continuing to try to be an elite coach. I think that's the biggest challenge. I mean, we're so competitive, like we talked about it. We want to be great at our jobs, but we also want to be great at, at home. And so, that lack of time, you really got to make sure that you use that limited time that you have with your family and really be present and find a way to be able to kind of, detach yourself from all the stress of work and all the stress of recruiting and all of those things, and really be there for the wife and for the daughter.
You've been at a decent amount of locations, but it wasn't like you've been job hopping to it. You've been pretty consistent at the spots that you've been at. And At some of those places, there's been some turnover, and you've got to experience different staffs and different head coaches. I guess throughout that whole time, throughout your whole coaching career, who have been some of your greatest influences on your philosophy, on your mindset, on your outlook?
Yeah. And so, when I think about those things, I think, obviously all the guys, I've worked with so many great coaches, like you've said, right? I haven't been jumping around from job to job throughout my career, but I have worked with a ton of different head coaches, a lot of other different, coordinators and assistants as well. But there's a couple of things. I think one person that really stands out to me is Keith Buckley, right? He was a head coach at Pacific University and now is the AD. I spent 5 years with him really early in my career, and he's just has a mentoring spirit. That's one of his, strengths is the ability to mentor young coaches. And, I really look back at my days and what he taught me from a professionalism, how to conduct yourself, how to act as a college football coach, really kind of set the foundation for me, how to go about my business each and every day, the work ethic that's needed, all of those things, right? Being a professional is something that he really kind of influenced me throughout my career and kind of started that for me. Then, my 2 years at Cal Poly, Coach Tim Walsh was really respected, right? Especially on the West Coast, has been a head coach forever. He's now retired. He really influenced me on creating those really deep bonds with the guys that you work with. He's one of those guys that everybody who's worked with him understands what I'm talking about as far as his ability to create deep bonds with his staff and with his players. But also, on the flip end, the standard was a standard with him. You knew that if you were acting or behaving in a substandard way or your performance was substandard, you're going to hear about it. He was going to be tough. And so that ability to be able to navigate, loving the guys around you and being close with the people around you, but also being tough on them when things weren't occurring the way they were, kind of shaped a lot of the way I see it and the way I try to operate, in my day-to-day kind of dealings with other coaches or dealings with my players. Then probably from a schematic point of view, Corey Batoon has probably had the most influence on me in the way I see the game of football from a defensive perspective. The way I see defensive structures, the way I, look to solve problems, things of that nature, defensive scheme-wise, he's probably been the guy that I've dealt with the most and probably has the most influence on my career.
That's good stuff. Kind of diving into that. Obviously you always have your coordinator hat on, even though you're not calling it right now. Kind of dive into, you're getting ready for San Diego State. This is when you're calling it back at you. You're getting ready for San Diego State. What's your deep dive? What's your process look like so that you're understanding the OC that you're going against?
Yeah, for me, the number one thing that I want to watch, Sunday morning, as soon as we put the last game to bed, the first thing I'm trying to watch is the explosive play tape, right? I want to see how they're creating explosive plays, how they're creating touchdowns, whether those are schematic ways in which they're trying to draw those things up or whether they're personnel based and they're trying to get the ball into certain people's hands, right? And being able to get an understanding of when they're at their best, what do they look like? So that's the very first thing. I'll be able to kind of put that first. It's on the front of my mind throughout the rest of the, game planning. From there, it's the ability to watch full games and being able to kind of find a flow of kind of what they feel like from a, play caller's perspective and just watching the flow of a game and how things kind of interact throughout that is kind of the second piece. And then from there, trying to get into their base down offense. Who are they from what do they hang their hat on? If you were to just watch them practice, a normal down practice, third downs and 2-minute drill taken out of there, what are they going to look like, from a practice perspective? What plays are they running? What are they doing? And getting a really good core of who they are from a DNA perspective. And then obviously then we dive into all the situational stuff, right? All the third downs and the 2-minute situations, backed up, low red zone, high red zone, and be able to kind of get through that. And that's kind of basically in a nutshell, kind of, what we're looking for and kind of the way I.
Yeah. If you could think back, I want a positive and a negative where you walked away from a game where you're like, man, I just got out schemed by that coach on the other side. And maybe you reached out to them, be like, hey, what did you see in us? And then on the flip side where you got the better of a coach and they reached out to you, can you kind of, touch on an example of that?
Yeah, probably, I look back on it and I don't know if it was 2022 or 2023, I can't remember, but at the University of Hawaiʻi, we were playing New Mexico and they had me. I sat in that box and the bullets were all out the chamber and we were still struggling. And it wasn't anything like, ground shattering or, anything in regards to what they're doing, but I knew they had me, right? And then being able to really dive deep into that and be able to kind of study that for over and over and over in the off season and being able to kind of make sure I don't make those same mistakes again. And they found a structure issue where they could motion and be able to figure out kind of what we were, what kind of coverage we were running and what we were doing. And they were kind of using some pre-snap motion to get some indicators, and kind of I vowed to make sure I was never stuck in those kind of structures again, right? And so that was something that I definitely learned for, and it was an embarrassing moment, an embarrassing night for us there, but definitely grew through that experience. And I think everybody kind of goes through that, right? And so that was definitely one that I'll always remember.
Yeah. If there's some advice that you'd want to give your younger self or young aspiring coaches who want to get into college football or coaching just in general, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I think it would be to make yourself indispensable. This you've been in the college game for a while, and you see how hard it is, right, to make it in regards to just it's not easy. And there's so many reasons for you not to get hired, regardless of how good you are, right? There's whether it's you're applying for a job and you're just not a regional fit in regards to recruiting, or you're applying for a job and you're too young or you're too old, or it wasn't the exact positional fit, right? And I think making yourself indispensable with the staff around you, especially with your coordinator and with your head coach, right, is going to limit those reasons not to hire you or not to take you along to the next place. And I think, at times in my career, I think I wasn't indispensable, right, where you could go and find another coach to do what I was doing, regardless of whether or not I was doing a good job or not. And I look back at some of those times and kind of wish I had done things a certain way, or done more, or whatever it may be. But I think that's what it'd be, is finding a way to do so much and be so part of everything that those coaches look at you, and that coordinator goes and gets another job and he thinks that he can't operate without you being there next to him. I think that's important.
Yeah. If I were to come and watch your practice and watch your indie session, or another coach came and watch your indie session, what do you want us to take away as far as, just the identity of how you approach practice and the identity of your room just from watching your indies?
I think the words that come to my mind and what I'm trying to, accomplish every day in practice for us, it's, efficiency, effectiveness, and in intent in everything that we do, right? That we're not going out there doing drills just to do drills. Like from a DB's perspective, right? There's a million different types of pedal, brake, turn type of drills. But if they don't apply to the schematic things that we're doing, then we shouldn't be practicing them, right? And so making sure that we're not doing things just to do and being very effective with it. I think something that I really try to drive home in our meetings pre-practice is going through the practice plan and letting them know what the intent is of everything that we're doing. Or, all right, in this, period 4, we're going to be working this specific fundamental work. Hey, this comes alive in these schemes. This comes alive when you are the weak hook defender. These are why we're doing those things, right? I think those are really important to make sure your players are not just going through practice and just kind of doing a drill just to do a drill. Or if we're in a tempo period, right, making sure that they understand that I'm not worried about the full-fledged execution of your technique. I'm really worried about our communication progression, getting lined up, getting our cleats in the ground, and getting your eyes where you need to be before the ball is snapped. And I think if they can continually understand what we're trying to accomplish, I think that's where growth occurs at a faster rate.
Speaking about drills and being intentional with your drills, if there was a drill that you would do or that you wish you did earlier in your career, could be a team period, could be, indie drill, what would that drill be and why?
It's a great question. I don't know if there's a specific drill that I could sit there and say, I wish I did earlier. I think there's an organization in regards to drills that I wish I'd done earlier, right? Kind of all that 2-spot and 3-spot stuff. I think that all originated with Nick Saban and has kind of, come through. I learned it with Coach Batoon when we worked together at the University of Hawaiʻi in 18 and 19. But the ability to 2-spot your drill work, 3-spot your drill work so that nobody's standing around, everybody's actively moving, everybody's actively working, right? Whether it's inside run session is going on with the 1s and the 3s, and you got, Skelly going with the 2s and the 4s, right? And then being able to flip those, and or if we have a team session, and, especially when, at the Division III level, I remember, our roster size is so big, and the ability to be able to, kids learn by doing. You can go and teach them in a classroom. You can teach them in walkthroughs, but, the way they're really going to learn is by actually doing it. But, getting on the 3 different fields and, and if we're going to go scrimmage each other, having, 3 different scrimmages going on where guys are, there's less guys standing around. I think those things are really important, and we try to incorporate that as much as we can.
That's so true. I'm thinking back to our numbers that we had at Linfield. Like, at least when it comes to camp check-in, we were close to 130, and that, there's obviously some attrition throughout the season. But going from And I thought we were efficient at Linfield. I think we were effective because it was reps after reps after
Right.
reps. But then going to, Boise State, going to Oregon State and seeing how they're a lot more efficient with their time. And like you're saying, a lot more two spot and a lot more good on good. I think that was our biggest thing that we didn't do at Linfield was
Mhm.
there was not a lot of crossover at
Really?
all during the season.
Yeah.
And I think that affected us as we got later in the season. Just to find that balance of, hey, let's get a little bit more good on good, less scout team reps to save our legs, but still getting intentional reps with good
Right.
on good crossover sessions.
Yeah, and staying sharp and seeing game speed. I think those things are important.
Yeah. What would you say is an underappreciated situation in football or an overlooked situation in football that probably doesn't get enough attention throughout the practice week?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think there's a couple of things I know that I've looked at in the past over years, and I've kind of tried to work and operate. From a situational perspective, I think like what we consider GBOT, right? Get back on track downs, second and longs. I think I haven't done a great job throughout my career of incorporating that in practice. I've studied it as a coach. I've had a plan for it in regards to calls, but I'm not sure if we've practiced it enough for the kids to really fully understand that down and the importance of it. I think that's a piece. I'm still trying to figure out a way to get better reps for end of game and end of half situations. I think, it doesn't come up often. And so sometimes they don't, you don't practice it as much, but when it does come up, the game's on the line. Right. And you see how many times, from a defensive perspective, you're watching this Hail Mary situation and you're sitting there watching it on TV and your anxiety's hitting because you know all the bad things that can happen. But, it's hard to replicate, right? You don't want guys jumping up and down and landing in each other's, ankles, in the midst of a game week, but finding ways to be able to, train those so that the guys fully understand what they need to be doing on that specific play. I know if we went in the classroom, guys would know what they're supposed to do. Have we taken enough reps for them to execute it perfectly every single time? I'm not sure. And so I'm trying, I think those are two things that I'm constantly on my mind. I'm trying to find ways to be able to train and be able to kind of situationally rep.
Yeah. Just to piggyback off of that, I mean, there's so many dynamics that are involved with that because usually when you're doing it, at least for us, it was always on a Thursday, end of it was either Thursday or Friday. I can't remember when we did it, but it was end of our defensive walkthrough before we got together and did our game script as a full team. But to your point, though, it's like there's so many variables that happen in the game. Like you're only rolling out there. The ones are the only ones that are getting the reps during them. And a lot of times, there might be an injury during the game or someone who, never been out there, getting that rep, or maybe, you're subbing an offensive guy in for the backline guy to be a jumper. Like, yeah, but it's hard to get those, I guess, those live bullet reps. So,
right. And think about it. How many times have you worked at an individual that the frontline jumper, backline
Zero.
jumper, box
Never.
out, right? I
Never.
mean, you talk about it and you think of it as a fairly easy concept, but being able to train those things, I mean, I think that's something that's always just on my mind. I get anxiety thinking about it right now, just because you don't feel like you're trained well enough in it.
Yeah, no, I feel you, coach. I feel you. If you could coach any player, past, present, could be an NFL guy, Hall of Famer, who would it be and why?
I don't know if there's a specific person, but the likes of, when you talk about safeties, right? The greats, the Ronnie Lotts, the Sean Taylors, right? From a linebacker perspective, the Junior Seals, the Ray Lewises. And I specifically would want to coach them to learn from them. That's what I'd want to do. Because I think those great guys, they see the game in a different perspective. Probably a lot better than I saw the game as a player. Being able to kind of just be able to learn from those guys, I think would be huge. I think back on this, and Coach Batuna and I talk about it quite often, but I'm not sure if you remember Kaimana Padello. Kaimana Padello was a rush end for me at the University of Hawaiʻi. He was 5'11", 225 pounds, former walk-on, kind of all of that.
Almost kind of like the Jackie Johnson kid they got there now.
Right. And when Jackie came into Hawaii, we kept saying he might be the next coming of Kaimana. I mean, that's kind of what we thought, right? I worked with Kaimana, and it was kind of my first time really coaching the edge rushers. And he was one of those kids that, I mean, he's not 6'5" and he's not 290. And if he was, he'd be in the NFL for a very long time. But he saw the game in a certain way in regards to pass rush that he and I would sit and watch tape. And I was learning more from him than he was learning from me in regards to some situations. And I really grew as a coach, being able to listen to him and be able to him talk me through certain things on, how he would attack certain pass rush or certain tackles. And why he decided to work this move or what he saw in this play that made him spin or whatever it may be. Those things, were so valuable for me. But that's what I think of when, being able to kind of be able to coach some of the greats is being able to kind of learn from them in regards to see the game. Because I see the game from a sideline perspective. It ain't the same.
Yeah, kind of reflecting on your time with Kaimana. Did a lot of those things, did it kind of seem like it was just instinctual, or is it actually something that was kind of deep embedded for how much he actually watched film and dove into the game?
He definitely had some instinctual pieces to him, but probably more than that, he was such a student of the game and understood the interaction and the combat in regards to pass rush that he'd study it. He'd set guys up. I don't think I've ever been a part of I've coached a player that was playing the game within the game as much as he did. Right. He'd come off the field and he'd kind of be like, hey, I'm going to straight rush him one more time. And then I got him, kind of as he's feeling him out or whatever it is. Or he would say like, hey, tell Coach Batoon, like, don't give me any line games yet. Let me rush this guy straight one more time. And then I'm going to come back for a move when the game's on the line to try to win this thing all, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
It was really impressive.
So he was kind of thinking, 4 or 5 plays ahead. Plays ahead.
He was way ahead of the game in regards to that. The game was pretty slow for him, especially when it came to pass rush.
That's awesome, Coach. Kind of thinking about, just your room and I guess just overall college experience. What is the biggest learning curve, for young safeties when they first get into the college game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be schematic, right? Just when you come from high school, the coverages and the intricacies of the coverages are not as, complicated and as comprehensive as it is in college. So their ability to really understand all the different things that we're doing from a coverage perspective, the volume of coverages, but probably even more so, just all the fine details of the way the coverages changes according to formations, I think is a big deal. And so them being able to first and foremost learn it. But then second, I think the big hurdle as well in the progression is their ability to be an elite communicator, right? It's different. They don't fully understand how loud it is out there on the field and not fully understand, how much communication is such a huge piece of what we do on a play-to-play basis. Those are the things that I really try to drive home. Here in Missouri, there's a song that plays on third down that gets really loud. The crowd starts going and the sound starts. I have that on my computer in my room at full volume. And every once in a while, I'll just press play on it just so that they can hear how loud it is and try to make them communicate over it, just kind of as a reminder of what we're going to be needing, in the midst of the season.
Yeah. That was probably one of the more, revelations for me is coming from Jackson Vaughn's defense at Linfield, where everything was so much formational checks and we could get into it really easily. Because you could frickin' hear and you could communicate across the field from corner to safety, back to the other corner, and then front and back, And that was probably when I first got to Boise State, I was just like, because with Coach Vaughn's philosophy was like, I always want to be in the best defense possible for X formation, for X tendency. And we had the capability to do that because of no crowd noise.
Right.
But that was probably the biggest surprise for me. Is like, guys, what are we doing? Why don't we put ourselves in the best situation possible? But then, my first game day experience, I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
that makes absolute sense. We're gonna be busted a lot more times, and we're gonna be right trying to get into the right call.
No doubt.
Yeah, if you could sit down with any coach, past, present, who would that coach be? What would that one question be that you need to ask them?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm gonna have to think about this one.
Yeah, go ahead, take your time. You can take 30 seconds because all I do is chop it up, and then 30 seconds is out the door.
Any coach, you said, and ask them a specific question.
I had Coach Collins on, Stacy Collins on last week from Boise State, and this was a good one. He wanted to sit down with Saban. That's usually a common one. But he wanted to ask him, how were you so consistent with your staff with so much turnover and still be able for them to be placed at different jobs? I thought that one was a really good one.
That is a good one. And that's why I got to think. I was trying to, immediately, all of us coaches, right? We just think Saban and there's some sort of question we have for him, right? So I'm going to try to change this one up. Try to think of somebody who's done things differently. Gosh, let's go back to that. I'll figure something out. I can't think of something right now.
In your opinion, I'm assuming this is your opinion too. Why is football the greatest sport?
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons why football is the greatest sport. I think one, because it's hard. It's a situation where, right, it's everything that you need to do to be good at football is going to be hard. It's going to be mentally hard. It's going to be physically hard. It's going to put you in uncomfortable situations over and over and over again. And I think that's what you can learn to do that, right? That's what's going to be able to create success in life in general after football. And I think that's a huge piece. But there's other sports that are hard, right? There's other things. Wrestling's hard. I mean, the triathlons are hard. All of those things, they do that. But I think football is a sport that is really hard, but it's the ultimate team sport. And I know you've heard that before regarding an ultimate team sport, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the only sport in which not every single person touches the ball or has an ability to score, right? If you're that offensive guard, you need to work just as hard and do all the hard things that everybody else needs to do, but you will never get the credit for the success of what happens on a single play. It won't happen. And so the ability for people to do hard things, do things right because they're the right things to do, regardless of whether or not you're going to get noticed, I think is really prevalent in football. And it's something that can definitely help with society. As we kind of continue to push men out into society and be leaders out there in the community, I think those things are.
If you had a magic wand and you could fix anything about the game, on the field, off the field, what would you want to fix?
It's funny, right? When we as coaches, we grumble about a lot of things, but then you think about it like, okay, what is one thing you could change? And you're kind of sitting there going, I don't know what thing I would change. I think if the one thing I would change in football, especially at this level, is probably how accelerated the recruiting process is.
Yeah.
We're recruiting kids at such a young level that I think there's so much growth that still occurs between someone junior and senior year. And by that time, a lot of times we've already kind of filled our class and have kind of moved on. And I think that's something that I think is missing a little bit, is some of the development that's occurring with some of these players that, at a later portion in their high school career, slow that process up a little bit.
Yeah, I can't even imagine it right now. What if I remember when I was at that Oregon, working in the recruiting department there, and we threw a couple freshman offers out there, threw a couple underclass. You don't know where they're going to be in 3 years. You don't know how they're going to develop in 3 years.
No doubt.
You don't know where this staff's going to be in 3 years. But yeah. Anyways, gave you a little heads up. Anela question of the day. So my daughter has a question for the guest of the day. I have to go wake my daughter up. Unfortunately, I forgot to ask her last night. But anyways, her question was, what's your favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert? I'm going to have to go with the chocolate halpia pie from Ted's Bakery back home in Hawaii. And I think more so it's because I can't get it up here whenever I want it. And so that's something that when I'm back home, I'm trying to get my hands on anytime I get.
Is there any Hawaiian spots out there in Missouri that you like?
No, there isn't. But my mom and dad live down the road. And so.
Oh, that's cool.
There's a lot of Hawaiian cooking going on, or local cooking, I should say, going on, that I can just go down the road and go get it.
That's awesome. Talk about the dream, man, where you get to have a job and then you get to help move your parents out there to be close by, to raise a family, and probably just to make you food out the whole time.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's been really good for them to be able to experience this. I mean, my mom and dad, essentially lived their entire lives in Hawaii, didn't travel much either. And so them being able to kind of experience this, being able to drive around to different places. I know my dad's a big Green Bay Packer fan, so he'll be up at a Packer game this season and doing those things. But I think there's 15 homes away from us. And so my daughter being able to walk down there and hang out and go grab dessert or just go over whenever she wants, I think is priceless.
Yeah. Kind of just thinking about the season, right? What does take me through just like kind of traditional game week, post game? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when we talked about, what you look for as a defensive coordinator, but what is a specific game week after you guys put the film to bed, getting ready for the next opponent? What does that look like? Yeah.
And so for us, we're a Sunday off operation here. So as far as the players are concerned. So, we coaches, we're going to be in there early Sunday morning.
No such thing as Sunday off for the coaches during the season.
No, there is definitely not. Grade the film, get all of those things going, get those kind of post-game reports and debriefings going in regards to what happened the day before. Once we put that to bed, then obviously we're turning it over for opponent scout for the following week, right? And so, we as coaches on Sundays, before we leave that night, want to be able to have a good handle of, who that offense is in a normal down capacity, right? Just kind of their normal DNA, how they operate. We really don't get too much into situational stuff yet. Just being able to find out kind of their structures, how they operate, what they're trying to accomplish from an offensive perspective. And then Monday, we're going to have the players. We'll have a very limited practice, more of a walkthrough, if you will, on Monday, where we'll introduce kind of the base offense we're going to be facing against kind of our base defense and get them up, kind of set the foundation moving into the week in regards to what we're doing there. And then Tuesday we'll practice base downs, more traditionally base downs. Wednesday will be a lot more situational for us in regards to, third down and red zone. Thursday, we do no sweat Thursday. So it's all walkthrough. And then Friday is fast Friday for us. And so kind of that's the way we operate through our deal. And, obviously we as coaches, we're kind of like a day ahead. So we'll do base downs the day before our players get introduced to it. We'll do the situational stuff a day before they get introduced to it then.
One of the things I thought was unique talking to Coach Collins is he was talking about when he did it with, he got it from Manny Diaz when they were at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
I think Coach Chenander does it at Boise State too. But they make it in a point to hit some of the situations on that first practice, so they can get it on film. And it's a lot of work for the GAs and analysts to get that far ahead and stuff like that. But I thought that was good just to get it on film early. So I just remember when we were here at Oregon State, like our Wednesday nights were our red zone goal line short yardage nights, but it was after recruiting hour. So now you're getting in as a defensive staff at like 7:30, and the coaches are already looking towards date night over there on Thursday, and so you're not getting out of the the defensive staff meeting till 9:30, which is not too bad. But like you think about some of the more important situations and critical situations of a game, and you're putting it on a Wednesday night when the coach has already just been doing this for 3 days straight of late nights.
Yeah,
so I thought that was a pretty good, just philosophy for them to get out ahead of that stuff. Yeah. Okay, circling back to the coach question, what we got?
All right. Probably there's two coaches that I'd probably want to talk to the most, right? And that's going to be Chris Peterson.
Yeah.
And Gary Patterson. And kind of the reason why, when I started first coaching, those two guys were really excelling, right, at Boise State and at TCU, and were playing on a national level. Place that probably, traditionally should not have been competing at that level. And my questions would really be surrounding kind of their recruiting evaluation. I mean, they were not signing 5-star players, but continuously playing great football and also putting guys out, high in the draft, and a bunch of big time players came out through that. And I thought they did a tremendous job of being able to evaluate in the recruiting process, sign the guys that were fit for them, and then find ways to develop those players into top-notch college football players. I think that, my questions would really surround that and kind of their philosophies on what they're looking for in the recruiting process and how they're moving forward in regard to the development of those.
Yeah, that was the one luxury that I loved about, being at Boise State and being at Oregon State, is just how many people that, the coaches made it a point to bring in to come and talk to the program. And one of them was Chris Peterson. He had a good connection with Coach Smith, I think was his OC at UW for a little bit. So he came in and, sat down and talked with us for about an hour and a half, talking about his leadership philosophy. And it was awesome to just, see someone who's kind of been through it all, and then, share his philosophy with the rest of us. And that's good. That's good stuff right there, Coach. Speaking about recruiting, let's go safeties. What does the ideal safety look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, from a physical perspective, we're obviously looking for guys with length. That does not mean the tallest player out there, but, arm length, I think, is extremely important, especially for the way we play, our catch man techniques and our ability to get guys in the box and being able to kind of take on blocks and things of that nature. And so there's got to be an element of length for them. They obviously has got to be able to have the ability, the speed to be able to run and cover the receivers that we face in this league. But I'm basically, those things can be measured, right? Some of the things I'm looking for on tape physically, right? It's pretty simple. I mean, do they show the skill set to develop as a man-to-man player? Do they have range in the post? And can they get guys down on the ground when the ball breaks? I think those things are important, right? So the ability to tackle, the ability to cover, and the ability to play in the post are things that we're looking for. Most part, I mean, I don't try to get too fancy with, all of the different measurements and things of that nature, but, watching the tape and seeing the person live and seeing if they look like the guys that have had success, previously, within our scheme. I think those things are important. I think probably even more than that is the intangibles, right? Are the things that, we're looking for beyond. I talked about it a little bit earlier. They need to be elite communicators, right? And so being able to kind of find out from their coaches what kind of communicators they are at the high school level, I think will transition them into becoming elite communicators at the college level, I'm looking for toughness, right? Physical and mental toughness. And so, the physical portion is easy to see on tape, right? They're gonna put their face on things, right? Are they gonna turn it down when opportunity to strike guys occurs? Those kind of things there are easily seen in regards to tape. But as far as mental toughness, I think I really try to find guys and really try to ask coaches about kind of what those people, their experiences have been. Have they gone through hard things and have they survived them? I think those things are important. Being able to see guys that have come from hard lifestyles and still continue to have success. I think that predicts the fact that they can go through hard things and be successful at our level. So, being able to kind of find out their stories, I think is really important.
That's good stuff. I was just thinking back to my time with Coach Lange in the defensive line room, and there was just so many different body types and so many different skill sets. So, as a coach, especially at the SEC level, like when you're recruiting, are you looking for the prototypical safety in each player, or are you recruiting guys to balance out that room to make sure you have, a good diversity as far as skill sets, length, abilities, personalities, things of that nature?
I think it's really important that you balance out the room in regards to skill sets, right? Especially if you're deficient at any of one of them, right? A couple of years ago, we really made an effort to get more length in the safety room, which we've done. And so now you can be a little bit more lenient. You can take an exception, right? In regards to length. I think if you look at your room and speed's deficient, then you got to go find guys that can run regardless of length. You got to be able to have those skill sets to be able to kind of balance the room out. And from a week-to-week basis, you have an opportunity by game plan to be able to kind of shuffle the pieces if needed, to be able to, effectively play on Saturday.
Speaking, just staying on the same lines, what are some red flags for you in the recruiting process?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest red flags now that you see is guys that are just more in love with the recruiting process than they're in love with football. Right. That's something that you got to beware of. I think there's a big difference between loving football and loving what football gives you. And because football gives so much right now to these student athletes, I think that it's really important to be able to figure out whether or not somebody truly loves football or is just in love with what football gives them. And that's not easy to figure out, but it's something that you got to kind of dive in through the recruiting process and search guys' social media, be able to talk to the coaches and talk to other people in the schools and be able to really try to figure out what that person's really made of.
Yeah. I know we're still kind of young in the NIL days. So you guys probably aren't experiencing this so much as of yet. But one of my biggest concerns, with a lot of this is, obviously football is a huge part of our lives. Football is a huge part of the players' lives. Now they're making a great amount of money from playing the game, and rightfully so. But what does it look like, for those guys who are making, good money playing college ball, but just are not NFL guys? Like, what does that look like from an identity crisis standpoint where, hey, I was able to make this much money for, my skills and my talent, and now I can't play at the next level. What does that look like now?
Yeah, I think those are one of the things that, I think we're really concerned about as coaches right now, because we're so new in this process. We don't know what all the consequences are moving forward with these kids' lives, right? For forever, we were able to kind of figure out what were the obstacles and the hurdles that players would go through once their careers were over, and we could be able to help navigate that with them. But I think we're moving in uncharted territory right now. And like you said, the dynamics they're real and they're different, right? The amount of money some of these guys are making is not realistic of what a civilian is going to make after college. And so that adjustment, like you said, there's an identity crisis I think that we all went through once we figured out that football was over for us. But now you add on the portion of a financial piece on top of that when, they're starting to go on with life and early adulthood and things of that nature. And they probably have a skewed understanding of what a lawyer makes and what a teacher makes and what a longshoreman makes or whatever it may be. It's a little skewed as far as what the reality is. And so I think it's really important that, we as coaches try to educate them as much as we can throughout that process for them to understand what those next steps are going to look like once football's over.
Yeah. Is there anything, unique that you look for that might be indicators of athleticism or just kind of mental makeup when in the recruiting process? The one I like to use, and I don't know why I always use it, but it's Coach Mirabal when he was at Oregon. Like he loved to see offensive line, how they got up off the ground. And I never thought about that, but it was just like, okay, were they explosive off the ground? Were they segmented? Obviously on a screenplay, what's their gait look like running in the open field? But From a safety standpoint, is there anything that like when you hear it or when you see it or when a coach tells you about it, like really piques your interest?
I'm really into multi-sport guys and multi-positional guys in football. I think those players transition really well to the college level and have so much upside because they're not a final product yet, right? I mean, you see with the amount of training that goes on anymore and the 7-on-7 stuff and the DB training and all of those things, I think sometimes you can get fooled on athleticism because people are accustomed to doing a drill and they can look really good doing that. But I think guys who played multiple positions in football show the fact that they have football IQ. They can learn a bunch of different scheme, which I think is an important transition into the college game for a safety. Also, they can see the game from a different perspective, from an offensive perspective, which I think helps, especially guys who played quarterback at some point in their career or played receiver. They understand what works against defenses and have an understanding of that. And then they have a unique ability, I think, that the guys that were multi-sport or multi-positional, for me, it seemed like when we were introducing a new technique or we're trying to correct a technique in fundamentals, they just had an easier ability to transition and correct it and fix it.
Yeah,
Just because
that
they're
makes
so
sense.
used to doing so many different things, being coached up on some of those things throughout their process as an athlete. And so to me, those guys have been the most successful for me up to this point. And I really like, seeing guys that are hoopers, guys that play baseball, guys who played on different sides of the ball, play different positions. I think those things really pique my interest when coaches bring them up.
No, that's a good point, Coach. And when you were just talking there, I just thought about it and it just kind of dawned on me. It's like I know something that I overlooked it, as a coach, but it's just becoming more and more relevant the more that I kind of dive into, talking to other coaches. It's like you're talking about players that play multiple sports, right? You talk about the learning curve and how they're able to take a coaching point and, like you said, transition to a little faster. But also, like for those guys that are playing multiple sports, I think it's very important that they fail a lot more than players
Yep.
who are only playing one sport,
Yep.
who, excelled at that one sport and they're not facing adversity and failure as much because they're the top dog at that sport. But now, now the hooper, he can go out and put a 25-point game and their team, still loses, or he can go and get dunked on, right? As a baseball pitcher, you can get struck out at the end of the game, or you could get freaking walked off on. So I think for those guys, I think it's very valuable. Like when you talk about multi-sport athletes, not only is it from a skill development standpoint, but from an adversity and mental toughness standpoint, where this kid's going to face failure, let's just say 3 to 5 times more. If they're playing 3 sports versus one player versus playing one sport, like they're facing failure 3 to 5 times more than that particular player.
Yeah, that's a
And
great point.
I think that goes a long way, in the development of that person and just the mental fortitude of that person at the next level. That's my only insight for the day right there, by the way. That's my only insight for the day.
I agree. That's good. I didn't even think about that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. From a teaching progression standpoint, if I were to go in, this is day one install. What does day one install look like? In Coach Yoro's room.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a true believer in building blocks and progression based teaching. That's something that I think is really important. I think if it just becomes random learning, I think guys struggle a lot more with that, right? And so the ability to kind of just build things, I think it's really important that when we look at our install, that the progression that we install certain schemes, it's important that we really look at that and understand how we want to lay that out, that things build on each other as opposed to kind of having to go backwards or forward or moving all over the place. I think that's really important for us. Really like to be able to, teach in phases when it comes to fundamental teaching. So if we're like teaching some sort of technique, like a tackling technique, that we really talk through phases and we train in phases. And so an example of that is, when we go through our tackling progression, talking about our tracking phase, right, our contact phase and our finish phase, all right, and we break down our contact phase with what our upper body is doing or what our lower body is doing, be able to teach that in the classroom and then go out there and actually train those in pieces, right? We'll get there and we'll work tracking one day. The next day we might be working, just purely the contact phase, and then we'll start to bring them all together. I think those things are really important for guys to understand and be able to kind of progress through it and be able to learn quickly. So kind of that's, really, that's kind of the foundation and the basis of our teaching in the safety room, is just making sure we're building on top of things and that they're sequential in an order that makes sense for their learning. I think those things, sometimes we can be so random as coaches, right? We can go out there and be like, we want to put in this and we want to put in that, want to put in this. And we're like, those things have not built on each other. And therefore it becomes just, random learning and rote memory.
From a scouting perspective, game planning perspective, what's the most pertinent information or cut-ups or handouts that you're giving to your players in your room for the upcoming opponent?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's anything more important than the other. I mean, for us, we're pretty exhaustive in our cut-ups, right? We have the thing that's probably helped the most with me in regard to that is we've put together a study schedule for the guys. And so they have a handout. Basically, every week they get a handout that's given to them with check boxes on there. And so Sunday, these are the 3 things I'm expecting you to watch on Sunday before I see you at Sunday family dinner. Here's Monday. I expect you to watch these things before we have our position meeting on Monday. Kind of just being able to kind of have a weekly syllabus, if you will, for them to be able to, study the things they need to and making sure that it's in the order that we want them to watch that in. I think some guys don't watch enough film and need to learn how to watch film and the volume of film they need to. And then some guys probably watch film, too much at one point. In one day, you can't absorb all the knowledge you need if you're trying to watch everything on Sunday. You're going to have to piece that out, and we're going to have to kind of grow throughout the week in regards to our understanding of what we're going to see.
Yeah. This always kind of intrigues me and I've never, delved into it at your level or SEC or the Big Ten, but it's like from the outside looking in, college football is a fucking huge deal. Okay. When you're inside those walls, how do you make it so, hey guys, it's a game. It's still fun, still finding that love of the game, but having that right balance of urgency, like, yeah, it is a big deal, especially down there.
Yeah, you always hear it, but it's the truth, right? It's about the process. It's about chasing the process, right? And not chasing the results. And I think us being able to just consistently making a big deal of the little things, right? Where a Tuesday practice, it is important that we execute at the standard in which we believe in, right? It's extremely important that on a Wednesday in July, that we are doing the things that we need to do at the standard in which we need to in order for us to have success, and being able to kind of put those things where it's a big thing when we go out on a Tuesday and don't practice the way we're supposed to practice. I think that way Saturday doesn't become bigger than what it needs to be for the players, right? That they just understand that every day coach is expecting us to execute at a certain level, is expecting us to do things up to our standard, and therefore Saturday, it doesn't elevate on Saturday. We just do what we're trained to do every single day of the year. I think that's really important. I'm doing that. And I think Coach Drink has done a great job here, of us having the opportunity to have fun. Like you said, it's still a game, right? For these guys to be able to have fun with it, and we do fun things. And, there's a mentality of, we talk about enjoying the journey. That's a core principle here. And so, the guy's ability to enjoy the journey. Part of that journey is hard work. Part of that journey is us being able to have fun be able to take a 5-10 minute break in a position meeting and really be able to have fun and be able to kind of get on each other or have some sort of silly competition or do something that continues to keep it fresh and light. Those things. Because you're right. There's a lot of pressure in these buildings. And the kids feel it. Social media, takes on a whole nother deal in regard to the pressure that is put on them, and Twitter and the expectations, external expectations that are out there. And so I think at times being able to get it light and being able to have fun with them about it, I think is a huge piece of what we're trying to.
Yeah. I had a coach on a couple episodes back, and one of his big mentors was Mark Speckman. Coach Speckman that was at Willamette for a long time. And he took his team down to a Willamette camp when Coach Speckman was a head coach. And it was an awesome one-liner. Coach Speckman said when it comes to football camps, there's two types of fun. There's Disneyland fun, and then there's build your house fun. He said this is build your house fun. It's going to be hard work. But I thought that was just a great analogy, because that's exactly what football is. It's like, it's not Disneyland fun. It's hard work. Get calluses on your hand, get blisters on your hand, work all day, and reap the rewards at the end of the day. So I thought that was really cool. Especially at that level, at the SEC level, how do you keep your players humble, hungry, and focused?
Yeah, the ultimate thing that keeps guys humble, hungry, and focused is playing time, right? When ass meets bench, right? Ass tells head, right? On whatever that saying is, but it's absolutely true. And at the end of the day, we understand that this is a performance-based business, and the guys need to understand that that competition for a starting job or that competition for playing time doesn't end after fall camp. Performance on Saturday is going to dictate whether you're still the starter and how much you play and things of that nature. And I think that in and of itself kind of keeps these guys humble and hungry and focused. I think focus is probably the big piece, right? Is keeping them focused. I think they stay pretty hungry. They, for the most part, this sport will humble you as soon as you think, you're too good. This sport's going to humble you, whether that's in practice, whether that's in a game or whatever it may be. But that focus part, I think, is always going to be hard for 18 to 22-year-old males. There's a lot of things that we go through. There's a lot of time commitment. There's a lot of mental strain that they go through on a weekly basis. And for them to stay focused with all the outside noise, with all the other, distractions that can occur at that age, I think is rough. And so for us, it's about, we talk about it all the time. When it's the meeting room, right? The meeting is the first thing where I'm going to see the guys before we practice or anything of that sort. And so we talk about leaving your mood at the door. And so, guys come in and they got that look on their eyes, like they're going through some stuff off the field and they're struggling with whatever. They walk back out and they come back in, and that mood better change before you walk back in and sit in your seat. And so, we don't get started until guys are kind of dialed in. But just constant reminders, right? I think like anything, man, it's educate them on what the process needs to look like. Hold them to that standard and correct it when it's substandard behavior. And usually from there, the players rise to the standard that you hold them to. And so I think that's been a huge piece, is just consistently. And I think that's the word. It's just consistent, right? As a coach, if you're letting certain things go on one day because you're in a good mood, and then certain things don't fly on another day because you're in a bad mood, I think it's hard for the kids to operate. But if they understand what the expectation is and it's consistently being upheld, I think they usually do a pretty good job.
Any surprises when you got to Missouri, or like, wow, this is what SEC football is? Any surprises? Anything that kind of you were taken back by?
I think just the resources, I think all of us kind of mentally understand that, but until you walk into a building and see it on a day-to-day basis, I think it's a surprise, right? There's still things that come up that surprise me, whether it's the amount of people that we have helping with a certain event, or whether it's the amount of work that gets put into our guys' recovery. Our athletic training and our nutrition staff and our strength and conditioning staff do such a tremendous job. But some of the science behind things and how easily available it is for our players to be able to kind of get their recovery done, sometimes that still surprises me, right? You walk in and you see guys doing certain things and, hey, what are you up to? And he's like, oh, they kind of, they track certain things and they realized that I was deficient on this, and I had the practice was a little harder than yesterday for me. So then therefore they've subscribed this whole nother routine for me post-practice. Those things still surprise me. All right. And so there's just so much that is involved.
I'm assuming, like yourself, there's a lot of other old school guys on the staff. Are you ever wondering, like, just too much? Is this too much? Guys are just going to have to work through some freaking adversity? You're a small school guy. You played in Montana. You went from freaking Hawaii to freaking cold-ass Montana. Like, you had to work through some shit back then. Like, is it too much? Are we coddling them too much? How is this shaping them or affecting who they are as a person? Is it too much, or do you think it's just the right amount to, maximize who they are?
No, I think definitely, right? There's times, with my upbringing in this game and kind of the experiences I went through, right? You see that and go, gosh, it would have been so darn easy if I was to be able to have all of these things like you guys do in regards to my athletic career. And I think at times we definitely think that way. But I think it's so important in this day and age of just performance-based, right? Just optimal performance and all the science that goes behind everything. I think it's really important that they have all of these things at their disposal. But also we as coaches need to understand that, with that being said, there's times that we're going to have to create hard for them, right? In order to be able to create resiliency and grit, that some of the things that just naturally came hard about things in fall camp at the University of Montana, for me, it's not the same. So we got to create hard for them in order to be able to kind of develop them the way we want to.
Kind of in line with that, I thought about this earlier. You talked about the resources, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of people on the defense and offensive staff. And just the access to information and the access to data at that level. I know it was a lot at Oregon State. I can't imagine what it's like there. But like good, bad, like I feel like your filtration system needs to be, because I feel like there's a lot of information that you can use to dissect, but like what's the meat and bones, or meat and potatoes, Yeah,
I definitely, the access to that information, I think is good, right? And I'm kind of one of those football nerds that I like diving into some of those things. But I think you're right. It's really important that we have specific filters on, that we don't end up down a rabbit's hole chasing something that doesn't really matter, or kind of wasting our time on certain things. And so, we try to keep things really structured in the things we're looking at. And if there's any information that's coming outside of what we kind of have structured for the week or that plan, that it's got to be really boiled down, and it's already got to be kind of researched intensively before I think we start, spending our time on that. And so, but it's awesome, right? I mean, the ability just quickly, the ability to sort, right? Get on PFF and sort certain things and be able to kind of look at certain things for tendencies. I think all of those things are so important. And I think it's a overall positive in regards to, the coaching profession. But there's been times where I've gone, as a coordinator, gone down the rabbit hole and realized it's midnight and I didn't take care of, scripting yet tomorrow's practice yet because I've been diving into something I shouldn't be.
And you're probably just like, oh shit, we just got to tackle better. We'll be just fine.
And there's a lot of that. I mean, really, right? You're looking at all of these things spit out. And the one thing that the data doesn't spit out is a why, right? So data can be kind of manipulated or it can be misinterpreted, right? You can sit there and go, the percentage of our low red zone defense is not very high. So then you want to throw out what you do in the low red zone, but it might totally be like you said, there's 2 plays that somebody miss a tackle, unblocked defender miss a tackle. Therefore, the stats are skewed. So being able to kind of investigate the why, I think, is really important.
Any final advice on coaching, leadership, team for the good of the community?
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing off the top of my head. I don't know if anybody wants to hear my advice on all of that stuff. So, but no, it's been good. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Coach.